If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Go ahead, Glenn. I know you got a million questions. Glenn is our draft insider and spent the time out in Indianapolis and did all that. Glenn's very into the draft.
Coach, before we get into the draft itself, I just wanted to touch on it because Ozzie and Eric DeCosta talked this weekend a little bit about this nature of having the draft before free agency and whether it be something that GMs might be interested in moving forward. That, could the competition committee consider doing something like this because it allows you to maybe more consider best player available instead of that inclination that you might need to fill a need in the draft. Would you have any preference towards that as someone who is involved in those meetings? Would there be any way where you say, this is better, I'd like to keep doing it this way?
And you're exactly right. The camps are pretty split based on the people I talk to. That there's some saying, you know what, I'd like to continue this to where we do free agency after the draft.
What would the agents want? The agents would want pre, or would the agents want post?
I think the agents would feel like there might be a larger market for their players pre. Because post, all of a sudden, you got 5 teams that were interested in your, it's like anything, multiple bidders is good.
Right.
And it was 5, now it's 3.
Right, you filled needs.
Now, there are some that say, no, I don't mind it being after because now if they don't get it addressed to the draft, now they're panicking. Now I've got the leverage on my side. So, it's 6 and 1 half a dozen.
It depends on the player and
I would imagine, I don't mean to speak for Ozzie, but I would imagine, and I would lean that way, Ozzie would much prefer to have free agency before. He liked getting those needs filled prior to the draft so that you could truly take the best player available. We didn't see as much of it with this draft because it was so subjective. It was an average draft, and you could go up a couple players and take one and no one could say you're reaching because 20 is the same as 25, 25 is the same as 35. But in years past, if you really had that need, whether you were cognizant of it or not, you would reach for a player, and you could see teams doing that. This was not an example of it. That's why I thought this was an intriguing draft, because everybody was going to get healthy, because everybody's going to kind of get what they wanted.
But it was funny because it still felt like we saw that a little bit. Minnesota, of course, with Christian Ponder, I think there was an immediate reaction that they felt like they needed a quarterback and went out and got it, whereas Donovan McNabb might be available in a month, and Mark Bulger, who everyone thinks is going to Arizona, is going to be available. Were you surprised by the fact that teams still did that and maybe reached a little bit for a player?
And reached, and I'm talking about by my book, clearly Jake Locker was a reach for Tennessee. And I like Christian Ponder. To me, at 10 or 12 is a huge reach.
Sure.
But I don't know that they looked at it. I think they honestly believe, no, this guy's that good.
Well, and don't we just get intoxicated with quarterbacks? There are 5 guys here. 3 of these guys are going to suck. I mean, they just are.
Here's the interesting thing. Jacksonville obviously felt like it needed to jump ahead of Minnesota to get Blaine Gabbert. So they orchestrated the trade with Washington. So they were either wrong because Minnesota wasn't interested in Blaine Gabbert.
Right.
Or, and I can't believe that Minnesota, they get jumped in front of, Blaine Gabbert goes to Jacksonville, and Minnesota goes, oh, well, we'll just take the next available quarterback.
Right.
We'll just jump to Christian Ponder.
They could have traded back to 28 and still got him.
Absolutely. So, but obviously they don't see it that way.
And Coach, this is going to be, and you don't have to give me the name of the player unless for some reason you don't care. Was there ever a time during your run here that you felt that a player that you picked early in the first round of the draft might have been a reach?
Oh, gosh.
People thought Dwayne Starks was a reach.
That was prior to that. That was
right before you. Okay.
Gosh, you're testing me.
Well, Ed Reed was the last name on your board, right?
And because it was late 20, anybody you take in late 20, I don't know you view that as a reach.
Sure.
The 2 that we really suffered with that you could look at and say these were blatant mistakes, Travis Taylor and Clayton. Now, in hindsight, that's easy to say.
Sure.
It's probably not fair. But the need...
But on draft day, it didn't feel like a reach. If you didn't take those guys at that number, somebody would have taken it within 5 picks.
Yeah, Travis Taylor was, again, coming out of Florida, the lack of productivity of Florida
Juniors.
That might have fallen a little bit, but who knows?
Now, that was a day before the draft trade, correct? That trade was made to move up on that Friday night. Before.
It may have been. I couldn't.
Jamal was drafted earlier.
No,
that was the Falcons pick from the year before on the given number 2.
You tested me here because I can't remember.
That was a tight end. It was Reggie Kelly. traded the pick.
But I'm talking about how we ended up at
10. 5 to 10, right?
How we got back into 10. Because we knew we had 4, we knew that was going to be Jamal.
Right.
But we got back into 10, and I forget how we got there.
I thought it was in that before. I guess I asked because we had an interesting scenario with the draft day trade. Obviously with the Ravens in the first round on Thursday night, in that they were trying to work out a deal with Chicago. A lot of people, conspiracy theorists, Chicago should have done this. They were clearly just trying to hose the Ravens, things like that. I don't buy into any of that, but the question would be, what would prevent a team, let's say it was the Chiefs, that were on the phone saying, look, we know we want Jimmy Smith. We know you want Jimmy Smith, but we want Jimmy Smith more. And we're going to give you something for it because we want to move up and we want to get that player that we think you're going to take. And they keep him on the phone until the very last minute. Sure. Purposely sabotage.
Our thing with Jacksonville and Leftwich and the Bowler Eve and all that. Jacksonville did a great job tying up Minnesota, just baiting them enough. Minnesota couldn't pull the trigger with the offer that was
right. There's no gentleman's agreement on any of this, huh?
No. There's kind of an honor among thieves, so to speak, but no.
So you're sitting in Ozzy's chair on Friday night at 11 o'clock when this goes down, and obviously Bisciotti was pretty pissed. And he went to the media, went to the league, did stuff. I find it hard to believe the league didn't do anything to remedy this, and to say to the Bears, well, you don't have to give them a 4, but you better give them a 5 or a 6 because you owe them something, because you screwed them and you admit you screwed them. I mean, that's really not in the spirit of what you're doing.
You can suggest that. First off, the commissioner doesn't have any latitude to do anything, to sanction a club specific like that in those circumstances. He can suggest, but he just can't say, okay, you've got to give up this up. He can do that to penalize you for an infraction, the way that doing something illegal.
But it's not in the bylaws.
This was just a no. There's nothing he can actually do.
I guess the question is to make sure it doesn't happen moving forward. Is there something that could be done by the league to set up like a red emergency phone? Hey, we've got a
situation. Well, as I understand it, and we've gone through this a number of times, the protocol is very clear cut. What happened was the GM and Angelo in Chicago, they agreed to it, and he thought one of his guys, one of his lieutenants, all right, you call it in. Well, he thought you did it, you thought he did it.
Well, the word is my boy Bobby DePaul used to do that, and Bobby wasn't in the room anymore, and that was the end of that.
So whether that was in, what's interesting is Chicago, there again, Chicago felt like they needed to jump in front of Kansas City because they obviously thought Kansas City was going to take Karimi. That's the guy they wanted.
Right.
And their intel and all that and all this intrigue said, no, I got to get in front of Kansas City. And as it came down, they didn't really need to because Kansas City wanted John Baldwin.
Is there any value in any of that information, or is
if it's real,
but it's almost never real anymore, right?
It's hard.
No one would send out a real smoke signal, right?
It's hard to know. So at the end of the day, Chicago lucked out because they were about to throw away a 4th-round pick to go up and get a guy that they could have gotten where they stayed, which they did get by staying at 29 and getting Green.
Coach Brian Billick is out with us. Glenn is here. I am Nestor Aparicio. We're at Bedonia Station. We're having delicious, tasty wings, and we're having ice-cold Coors Lights. We're going to step out. We'll take a break. We'll come back. Coach is out. We're talking football. We'll get into the Ravens. We'll get into the first round and go more pick by pick and talk about where Coach had some of these guys ranked. You watched them on the NFL Network over the weekend. Maybe you have some answers. We'll step out. Come on back. We're live at Timonium at Bedonia Station. All brought to you by Coors Light on WNST.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.